Content over everything.
Something has a beginning. If something has a beginning, would you agree that that thing which has a beginning has a cause?
In the world that we live in, yeah.
Okay. So would you apply the same logic with the universe?
Not necessarily. I mean, again, there's a lot of research on this. I'm not qualified to talk about it. But there's all, do you know what, like I say, do you know what quarks are? Like if you get down to Higgs bosons and things like that.
Okay, on a quantum level, yeah?
Yeah. There's evidence that this is how like quantum computers work too. You have particles
the reason why I'll be honest with you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The reason why
you're
I
asking
believe
if God made the universe. Is
right.
that what you're saying?
No, I haven't mentioned any God. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just saying. The reason why I don't believe that a quantum analysis, is relevant to us today, is because there's still a lot of work to be done in bridging the gap between the macro and the micro. And now, frankly, scientists and logicians and mathematicians and physicists and etc., they haven't been able to bridge those gaps. So for us to talk about like things on a micro level, on a quantum level, and then apply them on a macro scale, I don't think it's justifiable at this level. Especially when a lot of the stuff that's happening on a quantum level contradicts quite apparently what's happening on the macro level. And these are paradoxes of the quantum mechanical world, yeah? So I'm saying that instead of going down that rabbit hole, which could lead us into all kinds of avenues, which frankly are unexplored avenues, and we wouldn't have answers to them at this point, by virtue
a lot of the principles are demonstrated to be, likely to happen. Like, again, we've got, do you know quantum computers? They've got a lot of research going into that.
I understand, but what I'm saying is quantum mechanics as a science, right?
Yeah.
It's not really established in the same way as the macro. Like when we talk about physics,
we've had more time for the macro.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Exactly. Thank you. Yeah. So for that reason, for us to delve into, like for example, quantum mechanic principles, extrapolate from them, for example, logical precepts, and then use those precepts to inform a logical discussion, I think that would be kind of futile in a sense, because frankly, we don't know the limits, all the limitations of those particular principles in that context. And there are problems even now in bridging the gap between the micro and the macro. So that's why I say that, for example, unless you're willing to say, are you willing to say that the principles of formal logic, ones that we know of, that we require for deduction, for instance, that we're willing to put them aside? Because if that's
yeah, okay.
I don't want to say that. I'm saying that we don't have enough to say that. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm saying that there is not enough to say that...
To not focus on that for now, sort of thing.
No, what I'm saying is this, right? If you look at the quantum world, you'll find that some of the principles that can be extrapolated from quantum mechanics run counter to principles on the macro world, which include those that can be found in formal logic. Yeah, so I'm saying that unless we're willing to say that all of those formal logical principles, we're willing to put them aside because of what we see in quantum mechanics, which we can't yet explain, then we should put the quantum mechanical discussion to the side. Because quantum mechanics is not established yet for us to know.
I mean, we can put it to the side. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not
right
true,
or wrong. Yeah, accept it. Yeah.
Like a lot of things, if you go down to a small enough scale, don't make sense in large scale. It's just what happens when you scale things down that much.
Yeah, accept it. All right.
The same way a universe, that some of the mechanics that happen in the universe don't make sense if you're in a room. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It depends on the scale.
So that's why I'm talking to you about principles which we can see on a macro level, which we can, using empiricism, using deduction, using formal logic, using inductive logic, using abductive logic, using deductive logic, we can come to an agreement on. So things like causation, contingency. Because if they form the base of our discussion, then we can build upon the discussion. So if I say to you, do you believe in causation and contingency? Right? So the fact that, for example, in this universe, in this space, this domain, that things are dependent upon other things.
Yeah, for the purpose of discussion.
Right, perfect. So if you agree with contingency and you agree with causation, then I will just simply ask you the question: what caused the universe, and what is the universe dependent upon?
No one knows. No human knows right now.
Fine, but you accept that something caused the universe and that the universe is dependent upon something.
You said on Earth. Again, you don't know that for a fact.
So let me ask you a question. Did something cause the universe, and or is the universe dependent upon something?
We can't see that far into space to determine that. That's what I'm saying. There's a number of theories on how it started.
You see, this is where I think the paths start to kind of separate, because if we say that we agree...
Because you're saying that, I mean, your belief is God started the universe.
No, I'm not talking about
your belief, though.
No, it's irrelevant to this discussion.
Or some being created universe.
What I'm saying is, at this point in time in this discussion, all I'm saying is, if you accept contingency and causation, the two C's, contingency meaning like dependency, causation, which we define as something which brings rise to phenomena. My simple question is, if we apply this logic to the universe, I could ask the question, was the universe caused into existence, and or is the universe dependent upon something else? So if we say yes, it was caused into existence because we apply causation everywhere, and yes, it was a result or is dependent upon something. My question is, what is it dependent upon? Do you see where I'm going with this?
No, but that's my point. You're applying the logic that you see around you. It's the same thing that, I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying it's the same sort of thing you get like flat earthers and things. Do they go, I can see the earth is flat, so therefore it must be. They do that sort of thing. I'm not saying you are.
Yeah, I'm not.
But it's not, you can't, they're two different questions what you're asking. You're saying if you apply the logic that we see on Earth to billions of years ago in the universe, then that doesn't make sense. Like it's two different subjects.
Okay, I can see where you're coming from.
You could say, if you simplify it.
Let me simplify it.
Yeah.
Is the universe dependent upon something?
Its creation or its existence?
Its existence.
You could say its existence is, yeah.
Okay, fine.
As it is now.
What is it dependent upon?
Like physical principles. Like, what do you mean? What's dependent?
If the universe is
physics.
If the universe is dependent upon something, is the thing that is dependent upon dependent or independent? Think carefully. You said we agreed that the universe is dependent upon something, yeah?
Not the cause of it, as it is
I
right
didn't
now.
talk about causation.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about contingency. Is the universe dependent upon something? Then that thing that is dependent upon, is it dependent or independent?
It's dependent on many things, like I said.
So you
the
have
laws
the
of the
universe.
universe.
This is the universe.
Yeah.
Universe, yeah? You said it's dependent upon something. You agreed, yeah? Okay, it must be dependent upon something. Now, the thing that is dependent upon, is it dependent itself or is it independent?
What are you saying? The universe is infinite as far as we know.
Now, hold on. You've just said that the universe, you agreed that the universe is dependent upon something, yeah? So if the universe is dependent upon something else, that something else here, yeah? That something else, is it itself dependent or independent?
It depends how you see the universe.
No.
Like, are you seeing it as a closed system or?
Yeah, okay. The universe is a closed system, yeah? The universe is a closed system which, according to physics, is expanding, which means it has a beginning, you could say, yeah? Which is the classical model of science today. Anyways, the universe is here. It's dependent. So it depends on something else. That something else that it's dependent upon, is that something else dependent or independent?
Well, it's part of the universe. I mean, again, we don't know how the universe began, so it's part of the universe.
We're saying it's dependent upon something else, which means, by definition, it's actually not part of the universe.
You're throwing out all these fallacies. Like,
what's the fallacy about this?
Like you're saying questions that don't necessarily make sense.
Why?
Because it depends how you see. There's a million and one different factors.
Well, give me one of them.
Well, like, it depends if you see the universe is closed or open.
Well, I said, okay,
as we can't see.
We see that the universe is a closed system.
Because we can only see so far. That's
yeah? We could say, for instance, the universe expanded. The universe had a beginning. It's a closed system. This universe, which is a closed system, which is expanding or whatever, I've asked, is it dependent on something else or is it independent? If we say now here it's dependent upon something else, okay, this something else which is dependent, this something else which is the universe is contingent on, is dependent on, is it itself dependent or independent? There's something else which the universe is dependent upon. What is it?
I wouldn't say anything else would have caused the universe.
I'm not talking about causation.
Well, then the laws of the universe would, like, if you change any of the laws,
but
like
the laws
gravity
the laws are not necessarily a cause of sustenance or maintenance. Laws literally are organizational structures which cause certain things to happen in certain ways.
Yeah.
They're not something which power or cause energy. Laws are not energy, right? They're not a power source in a sense. Think of this as a mobile phone, right? The mobile phone, I've got my phone here somewhere.
I can imagine one, yeah.
All right, mobile phone. Which I need to get a new upgrade. Okay. This mobile phone, let's assume for the purpose of analogy, this mobile phone is the universe.
Okay.
If this mobile phone is the universe, this mobile phone has a battery, which nowadays, I don't know why, back in my day, we could take out the battery and stuff. But now they've trapped it in and made it impossible for us to take out the battery for some reason, right? Anyways, the mobile phone has a battery. So it requires an energy source in order to power it.
The universe has energy with it. What do you mean? The universe needs a battery or it needs some way to power it?
If we consider the universe as the mobile phone, its dependence is on something else in order for its generation, in order for it to be sustained and maintained. Just like this mobile phone, yes, it's on 62% battery, yeah? But believe me, because in a few maybe hours, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, it might be on 20%. Then it will be on 10%. Then it will be on 0%. Then it will say 30 seconds switch off. Then I won't be able to turn it on unless I power it. My question is now, if we consider the universe in the same way, that it's dependent upon something else in order for its generation, then I'm saying that something else. Is that something else limited in its abilities? Is it dependent itself on something else, or is that something else independent?
There's no something else. There's nothing outside the universe that powers it. The universe is.
So you're making a claim now. There is
as far as we know, the universe is itself.
Oh, you see. So you're saying there is no something else. So
well, outside
now
of the universe,
the mobile is powering itself, in your analogy, right? So it stays at 100% without any charge on.
Yeah, but that's because the universe isn't powered by something. The energy in the universe is contained within itself, as far as we know.
What I'm saying, if it's a closed system and it's been put...
Not, you can't say whether or not it's closed, though. We don't know that for sure. We can only see so far.
Well, the laws of physics apply only to the universe as we know it.
Yeah.
What is a closed system? A closed system is where certain things apply only within that particular system, right? So the laws of physics that we can observe, we can say they apply only to the universe. Now, going back to contingency,
I feel like you're going to bring up the second law of thermodynamics at some point, because it feels that way.
We could bring the second law of thermodynamics as a supplementary argument.
The closed system you're talking about, but you can't talk about the universe having power or having energy without talking about the creation of that energy or how that may have happened.
Thank you very much.
But my point is...
yeah, that's good. Now you're talking. Go on.
But that's my point. The point is, we don't know for sure what caused the universe.
You seem like you've studied this in uni or something, man.
No, not in uni. That's what it's an interest of mine. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm not qualified to talk about it. I might get some things wrong.
All right, no problem.
But if you're talking about the causation of the universe...
I'm not talking about causation. I'm talking about contingency now. We're focusing on... Because there's a difference between causation and contingency. Do you notice that? Because a causation is something which brings... A cause is something which brings rise to phenomena. Contingency is dependence. So they are different. That's why I started off by talking about causation and contingency. Because if you have a problem with causation, then let's focus on contingency.
Okay.
So here, I'm just talking about the generation, how
the universe powers itself, so to speak. Or...
Yeah, why not? How does it remain in existence? Is it dependent upon itself for its own existence? Is it sovereign? Is it eternally besought of all? Is the universe eternally besought of all? Or is it itself dependent upon something that's on? You good there? You right? Yeah? I like this. Right.
Again, it may well have had a beginning, so to speak, if you want to call it that. If it has, then
But here I'm not talking about time or beginning or causation. I'm just talking about contingency. Go back to our phone.
But you're asking how the universe powers itself, so to speak. It powers it's eternal as far as we know. So the energy is within it.
How do we know that?
We don't know, that's what I'm saying. As far as we know, though.
No, but there's no evidence to suggest. In fact, the scientific evidence runs counter to your claim. The second law of thermodynamics, the fact that the universe is actually expanding, both of those things run counter to the fact that the universe is eternal.
No, in the sense that you can keep going in one direction. And I mean, again, the universe...
That's not eternality. That's not the definition of eternality. Is it eternal in terms of time? But even if it is eternal in terms of time, it doesn't stop it from being contingent. So you can have an eternal universe in terms of time, but still be contingent on something else.
So I'm
Think about
really
it.
not understanding your point.
No. Look, because eternality, as far as I'm concerned, is a term which is a reference to time, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's always existed. Something always existed. Which, if you want to accept that, that's fine. If you want to accept that the universe always existed and there was no singularity and there's no beginning of the universe, which you kind of alluded to that you might believe in anyways. But let's say, for example, you believe that there was no beginning, yeah? And that it always existed. That does not run counter to contingency. Because just because something has always existed, it doesn't mean it's always powered itself.
So you're asking about energy not being able to be destroyed, about any sort of change?
No, that's within the, like you said, the closed system of the universe. But then, like you also
that's
said,
how it powers itself.
But like you also said, then we have
changes.
to ask ourselves, how did the energy get there in the first place and have those physical properties?
Yeah.
Well,
but that's where we come into the things that you don't want to talk about. That's what I'm saying. You don't want to talk about quantum mechanics or the start of the universe. But that's where the energy
the thing that we really don't want to talk about is the ultimate cause.
But that's where the energy would have come from if there was a cause.
Thank you.
But you don't want to talk about that.
No, the ultimate cause, we would say, is an entity which has the ability, the propensity, the creative capacity, and the will to put all of that into existence.
Not necessarily. What you're saying, it can't be explained with natural causes, or
what's a natural cause? How do you define
things that happen naturally?
Or in the context of the closed system?
Yeah, I mean, again,
naturalism is a worldview, like materialism. It's probably the same thing, which is only relevant within the closed system of the universe. We can't use that word outside of the closed system of the universe without speculating.
But what's to say the universe isn't within it? You know what I mean? There's, You're implying that there's an entity separate from the universe.
Yes, let's talk Simba, yeah?
Yeah.
Let me tell you something, right? Seriously. I think the truth is this. Me and you both know.
We don't know anything, honestly.
If we don't know anything, we wouldn't be having a conversation, believe me.
We don't know for sure about the universe.
I think both me and you know that if we do use the principles which we live by, principles of causation and contingency, and logical deductionism, rationalism, yeah, and inference to the best explanation. If we use those principles which we live by, I think me and you both know that the best possible conclusion to the reality of the universe is that it was caused into existence, or is contingent upon some entity which is independent. Because had that not been the case, there would be a chain of dependent things, which would be a infinitely regressive chain backward. Therefore, I would say to you that entity which caused everything to exist, the universe to exist, is in fact an intelligent source, is in fact a creative source, a powerful source with a will. And we would call that in the vernacular.
I mean, you can't...
Because of the laws of physics. Because if you think about the laws of physics, they're intricate. The fine-tuning of the universe...
A rock isn't intelligent, though. I mean, a rock isn't intelligent, you know.
I've said nothing about a rock.
No, but you're saying about an entity that would have... Like, for the universe to come about, you're saying an intelligent entity would have had to create it, that designs it, so to speak.
I haven't said would have had to. What I've just said, my wording is different to your wording. I've said the inference to the best explanation is that we have an intelligent entity, a thing, that caused the universe, or that the universe is dependent, contingent on. That's for me, the inference to the best explanation. In the same way as I would infer...
But to imply intelligence, you have to imply that this thing can think, whatever it would be.
Not necessarily. That's
or that it has some sort of conscience about it.
Will.
To make a decision, but you can't... I mean, I could just as easily say...
Do you see that that's a plausible option?
I mean, prove it. That's what I would say to me.
Well, I would say to you, what is proof? Because here, I think that's the atheistic recourse, to say prove it. Proving, what we just said, what we agreed upon, if you agree upon contingency and causation as principles that we can live our lives by, and if we do a deduction based on those principles, then that would constitute as a deductive proof. But if you don't want to use those principles and do an inference to the best explanation, then you won't have a proof. So it depends on what you consider proof.
No, but that's my point. You have as much proof as I may do, right? In the sense that you can
What's
say...
your proof? that God doesn't exist.
No, in the sense that you're saying an intelligent being you think may have created the universe.
No. I said that's the best explanation.
That you have?
No, it's the best explanation. If we apply, and this is why...
I could just as easily say...
This is a conditional. So I said if we apply principles, if we say that we use as a base principles of causation and contingency, in my opinion, the inference to the best explanation is that the universe was caused into existence and or that it is contingent upon something which itself is independent, eternally besought of all, sovereign or otherwise not in need of anything else, as well as having a will, intelligence and capacity, creative capacity to put other things into existence. That in the vernacular is referred to as God.
Why do you need intelligence to put something into existence, though?
Pardon?
Why do you need intelligence to have something be put into existence?
You see, the wording you're using is different to the wording I'm using. You're using word need, which is a word of necessity. I'm not using this word need. I'm saying that the inference to the best explanation, why do we see laws of physics? Laws of physics are an expression of, I would say, organization, thought, or intelligence, because they are sophisticated, complicated. I would also argue that they allow for a range of different phenomena to take place at the same time, without there being, in physics terms, an implosion of the known universe, or, for instance, things to contradict itself in the universe. For there to be a sustaining of the universe, and for there to be different complicated things that are working within the context of the universe and coexisting within that context. So I'll say that is another layer of argument, which is the fine-tuning argument, which I'm sure you're familiar with. You've referenced it, the watchmaker's argument, which would also enhance the argument. Because frankly here, then you have three different things. We can triangulate this. We can say here you have causation, you have contingency, and now you have fine-tuning. Now you're boxed into these three different things. Question is, how can we explain something which is most likely contingent on something else, most likely caused by something else, and most likely a result of intelligence, as it is the expression of intelligent processes? So I would say that would entail that there is a singular cause and or something which the universe is contingent on, which is also intelligent and allows the universe to be put into existence.
But the cause may, again, there's 1,000,001 theories about how the universe may have come into existence.
Well, give me one of them which you find compelling.
Compelling, I mean, we can't know for sure. Yeah, again, we've only just started looking into this stuff for the past 100 years. But again, if you look, I can't remember exactly what it is. But
multiverse.
No, not multiverse.
Okay.
No, there's been research done in the past few years. Again, going into quantum scales, they can basically find evidence of quarks. Do you know what they are? Quarks. Yeah. Q-U-A-R-K.
Yeah, I've heard of them. I'm not a specialist in quarks.
No, again, I'm not qualified to talk about it.
Neither am I, which is why I know my limits.
I've read some papers.
I'll tell you straightforwardly that the quantum world for me is a confusion, right?
It is confusing.
And especially when we try and bridge the gap between quantum
We've only been
and macro.
here a few 100,000 years as humans. You know, it's not something we can comprehend.
Exactly.
It's not
so
like
I would say that because quantum mechanics is paradoxical with the macro world on many different levels. Yeah, using the rules of quantum mechanics to inform a logical discussion at this rate is unjustifiable.
No, but you're asking for a compelling argument. One argument I find fairly compelling is it's not a definite. It's only it's early stages. You have quarks, and they've basically found evidence that these can phase in and out of existence, like entirely in and out of existence. Tiny microscopic particles. They've also found evidence that, if anything, the universe, even if you go into deep space, there are still particles. If you go into deep space, you know, even if you go outside the Earth or outside of the solar system, you know, there's still particles around. It's not complete vacuum, absolute emptiness.
Absolutely. That goes against the idea that something could come
But in these experiments that have been done over the past few years, they've found evidence to suggest that the universe, if anything, favours having something there, so to speak, rather than nothing. The Big Bang may well be a separate event. It may well be continuing. You know, it depends.
I understand what you're saying.
But that would start. Yeah, that's
there is
one
no
theory.
You've made no coherent case for another explanation that could be inferred
That's
to the
why
best
there's a whole
information.
field of science dedicated. I mean, your best case is saying, I don't know for sure how it happened. It must have been something that made it.
I haven't said that.
That's what you're saying. You're saying it must be some force.
Well, I don't think I have said that. I've never said once, I don't know for sure. I haven't said these words.
Well, it's clear you don't know for sure.
But that's something that you've said. I don't mind.
No, but my point is...
But then we go to knowledge. What is knowledge, right? How do we know something for sure in the vernacular, right?
You're giving me essays and you're throwing all of these terms at me. At the end of it, if you boil it down, you're basically saying, logically speaking, as far as we can see, and as far as we experience on Earth, we don't know for sure, so therefore something must have created it.
I haven't said that.
No, but that's what you're implying with what you're saying.
No, but that's what you've interpreted.
If you look up at the rain right now, a logical way of seeing it.
I've said it this way. I say
no, but if you look up at like the rain right now,
okay.
As an example,
let me repeat what I've said.
You would say the rain must have come from the sky, but we know it comes from the earth, from the ocean, goes up, comes down. We can't see it. We don't have any experience of it. It doesn't mean it's not true, though. Do you know what I mean?
Not really. I don't think that was a good analogy.
No, it's not. It's just something I pulled out my ass just then. But I'm just saying.
Listen,
it's the
think
same
about
sort
what
of
I've
thing.
said. Think about what I've said. Right?
Yeah.
I think you've got an open mind, right? If you just let it ferment in your mind a little bit, what I've said, on a logical level, ask yourself sincerely: is what I've said more rationalizable, more digestible, more concrete than what you believe in or not? And if it is,
Not necessarily.
No. Think about it. Don't just make it. Think about it. Just think about it. And if you come to the conclusion that not necessarily,
None of us know for sure. That's my point.
Fine,
None
no
of us
problem.
can say for sure this happened.
Okay, for sure. Let's deal with the word for sure. Yeah. What does the word for sure mean?
Definite. Like I
Okay.
know that.
So what do you know for sure? Tell me one thing you know for sure.
Well, again, I have a feeling I know how this is going to go.
Okay,
you're going
fine. So, no, tell
you're
me
going to
what
go.
you-
I can see this, so therefore I know for sure.
Now tell me
And
what
then-
you know for sure. That which you can see, you know for sure. Is that correct? All right. So, do you know this is really interesting because
As one example.
René Descartes, when he wrote his meditations, it's a book. I think he had 6 meditations.
Have you read it?
Huh?
Have you read it?
Yeah, I've read the book. Yeah, I've read meditations. Yeah. He had 6 meditations. Yeah, and one of them, I think, in the 3rd chapter, he was talking about the sensory deception. He was saying, how do you know? And it's a really good question, right? How do you know your eyes or your vision, right, is not in fact, it is in fact a complete. It represents exactly the external reality. How do you know that for sure?
We don't know that.
Thank you very much. So you don't know for sure you're wearing a necklace.
However, there's so many people. We can agree with each other.
But yeah, okay. So can you see how for sure here, if we use a complete
No, but I know
philosophical,
personally for sure that I went next. As I'm
so
sure.
subjective. So it's subjective.
It is
opinion.
No, it's not. I confirm you are wearing a necklace.
But that's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
he's
That's how it
confirming it.
works.
That's testimony, right?
Well, it's evidence as well. You can see the evidence.
Okay, so
where you
the
can-
evidence. See here, you're defining evidence as empirical evidence and only reducing it as such. That's why in the beginning of this discussion I said, do you accept causation and contingency as evidence?
On Earth, what we can see,
Yeah,
yes.
fine, no problem. But what I'm saying is, generally speaking, as precepts, yeah, do you accept contingency and causation? And you said, yeah. And so we went forward with your evidence, with what you accepted, and then you realized that when you apply it to certain cosmological realities, you
keep doing
rejected
the old
it.
bait and switch. Going by that same logic, I could say there's no bacteria all over our bodies because we can't see it. But we know, we can use a microscope, we can see, that there's bacteria there. Just because you can't, you can
what
trust
we've
your
already
senses to a degree,
But Simba, exactly, thank you. So Simba, what you've
but
established right now-
equipment that can help you, is what you can also use too as evidence. 'cause you can
what
see
we've
through
just
the-
what we've just established there is that which you can see or hear or smell or whatever isn't necessarily always going to be a representation of the external reality, because it could be the case that those sensory receptors are in fact impaired, or it could be the case that you've interpreted that sensory information in a way which is not in line with the reality. For
could look
example,
for a
if you're
microscope too and see
for
a
example,
bacteria.
how do you know you're not colorblind? How do you know you're not colorblind?
That's the interesting point too. We
No,
don't know for
I
sure.
want you to answer this question. How do you know that What color am I? What color am I?
Well, we don't know if it, again, you
What
only
is this?
yourself.
What color is this
You
jacket?
can trust your own senses, but my yellow might not be your yellow.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So actually, what you're saying here is different to what you said about 5 minutes ago. Because what you said is, I know for sure my necklace is on. That considers that you are saying.
No, but I'm talking about a term that you would use to describe something. Yellow's a word. This is a thing. You can see it. You can feel it. It's not the same as a word that you use to describe it. It's the same as you could say.
Are you with me on what I'm saying here?
No.
Yeah.
I'm saying to you that
you're not really
if
paying
you use
attention.
an entirely empirical approach, I could argue that when a dog sees black and white, that reality is as real as you seeing a coloured entity.
To the dog.
Yeah, to the dog. So you can't say that the dog is what the dog sees is wrong and what I see is right.
Well, we know there are many more colours.
Yeah,
absolutely. We're not saying that the dog
Good.
sees
So
it.
actually, so what that suggests is that empiricism, or the idea of using the 5 senses in order to ascertain real things that are happening on an external level, is limited
why we
by
have
the
equipment to
sensory
test and show-
receptive things, which are the 5 senses themselves. Which is the argument that René Descartes put. So actually, your use in the vernacular of the term for sure or definite is in fact never. You can never be sure of anything, according to this, because you're not sure of things which we use contingency for, causation for, or empiricism for. So really, you're not even sure that you're here right now, are you?
You're getting really existential on me here, mate. I mean, the English language is really interesting. You can say for sure in casual conversation. This is what I'm saying. This is a discussion we're having right now. I'm not on trial. I meant that in the sense that I know for sure I can see it to myself. This is definitely here. But you're then coming back at me going, okay, give me the evidence.
No, but
for
the
this.
thing is, this is the thing about when I have discussions with atheists, is because they apply a maximum skepticism to what I would consider things which are deducible and which can be tracked through inference of the best
But the
information.
opposite- I would say
But
the opposite
when
to
I
you,
do
though.
the same
Your logic
thing,
is refutable.
when I do the same thing when it comes to, for example, entities in the external world, it becomes pedantic or otherwise something which is above and beyond the scope of discussion, and we shouldn't be talking about that. But if you want to have that level of philosophical skepticism, surely you should be having it with all different kinds of discussion, not just theological discussion.
No, the empiricist approach works wonderfully well. Science has been wonderfully successful in creating the modern world. And science is based upon the empirical approach, that you observe, you test, you analyse, you theorise, and you refute what doesn't work and you make new deductions.
Yeah, I agree with that point.
Your argument is simply some sort of quasi-philosophical argument that there has to be a contingent body, which you call God. And I say, well, who made God? Where did that come from? Why is that contingent? Why is that non-contingent itself? Why can't I just say the universe itself is non-contingent?
That's a good question. So do you want me to answer it? So I would say that
I've heard you answer it before. You don't answer it. You never answer it.
All right,
Go
well,
ahead.
well,
Try
let me
one
try
more
and
time.
repeat it. So
one more time.
Here, the question he put was that who made God, right? My premise was always the fact that if the universe had, if the universe had a beginning, that beginning must have either been dependent or independent. If it was
What
independent,
does independent mean?
independent means sovereign, or otherwise
sovereign mean?
it means eternally besought of all.
You suggest using terms which are
But
very
you've
ill-defined.
asked me to define it in one way, so I'm using another word.
You're repeating terms which have no clear meaning.
Okay, if, in your opinion, that have no clear meaning. What I'm saying is, the argument for causation starts in the following way. Anyways, the cosmological
Can I
argument.
just make-
Let me just make this point. Sorry, I apologize. Is that everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. That argument starts with the premise that everything that begins to exist has a cause. We would say that God, or what we would render as the entity that brought everything into existence, didn't begin to exist in the first instance. We'd also say that.
But you can say the same thing of the world. Maybe
Pardon?
it never began to
Pardon?
exist. You could say the same thing of the world. Maybe it never began to
Yeah, we had that discussion. We did have that
No, but
discussion.
there might be an oscillating universe. We don't know if the universe is eternal.
Yeah,
or
I
not.
know, but
we do
it's-
know that there was a Big Bang.
Yeah.
And according to current theorizing, but that could be an oscillating universe. We could contract, expand.
Yeah,
ad
we've
infinitum.
talked about those models as well.
There's
But
many
did
more.
you that-
Can I just point out though?
Yes.
Just quickly, on that basis of God must be eternal, have been around forever, separate from the universe. That doesn't make sense either. For the same reason you said to me.
Say that. I didn't
In
say that again, sorry.
No, that God being this entity must have been eternal. You can't measure something eternal for a star, as I'm sure you know. It's always been there, always will be.
Okay, so you're saying
By-
that. So go ahead. Sorry,
By that
continue.
logic,
Yeah.
You're saying that either there is no God and the universe was within its own universe, the universe is itself, or there is a God and the universe is eternal and was never created, because you can't measure something that's eternal. You can't say the universe was created 12.
So what you've committed there,
No.
Sorry.
I let you talk.
I apologise.
You can't
because
say
these
that,
guys also had their little
just
disconnect.
quickly, you can't say the universe was created 15 billion years ago, whatever, by a God. That's also eternal. Why was that not created eternally ago? If the God's been there forever, twiddling his thumbs for all of eternity, you can't possibly have something start.
So, is that correct? So I can answer it. So I would say to you that what you said in the beginning is that if you can't measure eternality, therefore eternality cannot exist.
It's a concept.
Yeah, right. Do you mind if I just answer it?
From the answer of that
Sorry.
question.
Do you know me just answer this and then you can come in, if that's all right? Okay.
It's short.
So I was just going to say that just because you cannot measure something, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That's called the fallacy, an argument from ignorance.
Yeah, of course.
It's a different way of measuring though. You can't measure.
So go ahead. So you want to say something? Do you give them a question? Yeah.
What's your name? God?
What's your name, sir? Sorry.
Johan.
Johanna, how you doing? You're right.
Nice.
Go ahead, sir.
It's just a matter of words. You name something God, you name something the world. No matter what you
Sorry,
say.
can you raise your voice a bit because I can't hear it.
It's just a matter of names. You call something God, you call something world.
Yeah.
And no matter your reasonings, at the end you could just say, okay, what you said on God, this I call the world. And then it changes everything.
I agree. So semantics, right? A lot of it is
I
semantics.
would just mention one point is that if you, those who put the word God on things, those who say God, they have a lower opinion of the world, which is a paradox. Because if you have a great opinion of God, or if you think God exists, it means you think the world is not beautiful enough and big enough and wonderful enough to exist by itself. It's paradoxical.
I don't think we've made the argument of aesthetics here. I don't talk about how beautiful the world is. I haven't made that the argument. But go ahead. What did you want to say?
No, like my point was, eternity as a concept. It's not something. It's measured in you can't measure it, but in a different way to you can't measure the amount of atoms in the world, sort of thing. It's the sense that.
Does that mean that the atoms don't exist? Or?
No, but eternity is something different. It's purely a concept, sort of mathematical concept. You can't possibly begin to measure it.
But you can't negate its existence because you can't measure it.
It's not something that exists as such. It's a concept.
You can't negate its existence because you cannot measure it in the context of the universe.
But that's different.
So we're saying that, okay, I agree with you that it does not exist in the context of the universe, but we're talking about the domain which is outside of the known universe.
Yeah.
Of which we have no evidence whatsoever.
Exactly.
There is no evidence.
Yeah, there is no evidence, but
And therefore I prefer
it's
not to
easier
so
believe
we
it.
can't speculate
based on
it.
faith.
But it's easier to think eternity than
Everything
to
is
think
based on
beginning.
faith. The fact that you're here talking to me is based on a kind of axiomatic evidence base you've given to yourself.
No, faith in the
Intriguingly,
biblical
physics
sense.
says
You
time
can't.
began.
Faith
I guess you would argue.
I do.
on the philosophical level, everything is faith.
You go to your doctor in faith that he'll make you better. You'd argue something
You'll
like
never
that.
see a
Or
Bible
the
say
fact that you have
tell
faith
that.
that you're wearing a
The
necklace.
big main thing is just
Without your
to
senses.
There's
exist
evidence
and
that
it's
you
very,
can see
There's
evidence.
evidence of everything.
very
Yeah,
modest,
exactly.
There's evidence of Santa Claus.
There's no evidence of
They
that.
don't really say that.
That's
This
what I'm
is
saying.
interpretation.
And you're a living evidence of Santa Claus. I mean, if you were Santa
My
Claus,
point is everything you're saying, as far as evidence for
God to say otherwise to say that
can
time
easily
existed
be
prior
refuted.
to
okay, well, I'm happy that I've given you a chance to do that,
Time
and
is
we'll
just
see if
relates to
that's
matter.
been done.
There's
Because
nothing
frankly,
doesn't
I don't see that there is any
time is
substantive
I will say,
evidence.
actually,
It's just like space.
just to get
But
to
it's
me,
the
because
same.
I feel like
We tend
we're
to imagine
discussing
it
this
separately,
much,
but it's
and the whole subject, there's
it's
this
just an
much. Do you know what I
abstraction,
mean? Into the meat, like,
down the path.
why
Time slows down for you.
do people, like, why is there any point in discussing this in the
Yeah, but
first place
that's-
if there isn't a reason
But that's
to be discussing it in the sense of believing in some sort of afterlife?
No,
You know,
but
what
you're
would
saying
make
on the
what makes you
human perception.
passionate in that sense? To actually want to try and
No, but my point
persuade
is
people that there's a God.
people who believe in
Well,
God
I mean,
Why does it
don't
matter
have faith
if
in the
there's no
world.
consequence?
True.
Question of why.
But they have,
That's
they
what
claim
makes
that science
human
has all
beings,
the answers. And of course, science doesn't
I would
have the
say,
answers. Science is unique. Slowly but surely,
I would argue that human
how the
beings
universe works. These
are
people place
unique
their faith on revelation
or
from the Holy
distinguished
Book,
by the rest of
Quran,
the animal
Bible.
kingdom
you're not atheist.
in so much as they can ask that question. So I would say that the ultimate question that why
No, not necessarily. I mean, we
I
can
would
make
argue
things.
that.
We can make things, but you go to the London to 10 minutes down the road. You see, you know the manganese there, the monk. You see them using sticks. You see them.
Yeah, but that never.
You can say that that's questioning why, because well, is that process. You can say learning is that process because they use a stick.
great that you have
They
this
figure
thing
out that they can get like food with it, you know.
Or
And then they go,
animals on a lower level can ants do that.
but it's a lower level, you know, it's a different type of consciousness. All animals think in a different way.
I'm not suggesting that animals don't think.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that on a higher level, human beings can ask moral questions of why.
It's not necessarily I mean, moral questions, yeah. But, you know, why as in...
Ultimate questions. Why do we exist? What is the purpose of life?
I'll become a Muslim right now.
And that's,
I mean-
I think 3 questions come to my mind when we're talking about human existence. Where did we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? And those questions, I believe, if we're serious about our human existence, we ought to ask ourselves. That's why I'm passionate about it, because I feel like the inference to the best explanation.
But you must have a reason behind, like, because someone like me, I'm doing this, it's a Sunday afternoon, I've got nothing else to do, I'm just, it's entertaining, I enjoy doing this, yeah. But, like, someone like me, on an everyday, like, without being here, I wouldn't feel the need to go over to people and tell them this is, you know, how I think. Because it doesn't necessarily, like, as far as I'm concerned, it's natural processes, there's no afterlife, there's nothing to worry about if you don't have any particular beliefs, we're the same, in the physical sense, we're just animals on the planet like everything else. So, like, there must be a driving force.
Yeah,
Like
so I would
Christians,
say that
for
my
example,
concept-
Christians, they
yeah,
have the
sorry.
driving force of, oh, I want to save people and bring them to the afterlife. I can get that logic, even though I don't believe it, I can understand, but I found that, like with Muslims, I find that 99% of them here, they don't want to discuss the Quran or their personal religious beliefs. They just want to talk about one tiny point of how the universe began, which none of us can know. That's what I mean. I wouldn't mind.
We do talk about it.
I mean, I wouldn't mind
it's part
talking
of their
about like the reasons behind your motive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, as I said to you before,
Because you're asking things that can't be proven.
the Quran is what we believe is a discussion, or it's even the word of God transmitted through the metaphysical entities of angels to the physical entities of prophets to the rest of humankind. But if you don't believe
in angels.
you believe in angels, yeah.
And jinns and spirits and angels.
Jinns, angels,
So you're
spirits.
going on about empirical. You're going on about like you can prove
Of course,
things
there's
that you
no
can see.
evidence whatsoever.
You have no. There's less proof for angels than there is for a god. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's
no proof for angels.
But hold on. Because you can't see angels, because they're metaphysical, right? Can you see things that are happening on
This
a
is a
quantum
concept
level?
that there's no proof
Can
for.
you see things that are happening on a quantum level?
Well, I think there's evidence for what's happening
There's
on the atomic
evidence, yeah,
level.
exactly,
There's
you
no
can
evidence for
measure
angels.
No, but hold on. Can you see what's happening on a quantum
Yes,
level?
we can, through inference.
No, we can't see what's happening on a quantum level.
We can see the results from machines
No,
that
but
can measure.
but we cannot see
We can't
actually.
measure or see
What do you
anything.
mean see?
Okay, can you see language?
That's a ridiculous question.
Can you see
It's a
mathematics?
different- It's a different
Ridiculous.
concept.
Can you empirically verify
You can see words.
If you don't mind, let me ask this question. Can you empirically verify the existence of mathematics?
You can say 2 + 2 is 4.
Yes, that's conceptually. Abstractly, we can say
Everything is conceptual by that logic because language is what we use to communicate.
that. There are tangible things and there are intangible things. That's why.
But this has no meaning to it.
But
This
hold on,
is
because
this
what
isn't
you
a
said-
cup
but if-
unless you put
See,
language
look,
in.
when you apply criticality to your own precepts and concepts, you realize that actually, hold on, I'm not being philosophically consistent. Because what you said here is that we have evidence for something's existence, therefore we believe in it. And what you meant by it is that we have empirical evidence.
We're
I
open
ask
to
you,
changing
I
our
ask
minds,
you to get me
but
one empirical.
we follow the best evidence there is for
Fine.
something.
I'm asking you to get me one piece of empirical evidence for the existence of number 5.
I did a maths degree and I've used the number 5 many times, so
Fine, but it's in your mind. It's not something which is, you can't smell number
They're
5,
different
you can't
senses.
taste number 5, you can't see number 5, you can't hear number
This
5.
is very muddy thinking.
That's what I mean.
It's very muddy thinking.
But
We're
see,
comparing the existence of
well,
angels.
you have
which
to
are-
be able to use. You have to be able to use your own criticality
You're doing what my
to your own
girlfriend does.
concepts.
You're arguing about something when you can't think of a reason. You
girlfriend's a
switch
cl-
to something else.
No, your girlfriend's a clever person because she's using her critical thinking.
No, in this, I'm
You're not using
making a
critical
joke
thinking.
for
Where is the
start.
evidence?
Listen,
Where is
she's
the evidence?
clever.
Give me one piece of
She's
Talking
doing
evidence.
about
the-
angels and you're changing it to
One
maths. That's what I'm
piece.
saying.
You're saying you don't believe in the existence of angels
one
because
piece of evidence
you.
Yeah,
I'm telling you.
What's the difference between
If you
number
don't
5
mind,
and number
you said here the reason why you don't believe in the existence of angels is because you can't see the angel. I'm saying, okay, so do you believe in the existence of number 5?
I believe that there's a magic blue pumpkin flying around Jupiter. Can you prove that that's not true? That's what you're saying to me.
A magic blue pumpkin.
Yeah, that's there. There's definitely a pumpkin at Jupiter. I believe
Well,
that.
that's interesting because that's
Prove me wrong.
falsifiable.
That's what you're saying.
What you've actually done is you've put
That's
forward.
the same thing. You're
No,
saying
it's
you
not.
can't see angels.
Let me
but
tell,
I
let me
think
tell you
they're
the,
there.
let me tell you the difference. The difference between what you've mentioned and what I'm mentioning is that what you're doing is actually falsifiable from a scientific perspective. If I say
What
here,
you're saying is
no, it's not.
look, angels.
No, let me tell you why it's not. No, but hold on, please. Simba, be patient with me, please. Because you're asking me questions, and I haven't got a problem answering them. But please be patient with me. So the philosophy of science dictates that science has naturalistic presuppositions. So in other words, that which is grasped materialistically is only, so science only deals with the material world, agreed? So it doesn't deal with metaphysical stuff. Science can only falsify that which is materialistically verifiable through empiricism. Now, what you've said is that you believe in a blue pumpkin flying around Jupiter. That's like, hold on, I'm just saying, I know you've said that as a matter of argument, right? But if we say that is actually materialistically falsifiable, so if I were able to explore...
But that's the same as saying that you can't... You're saying... That's the same way as saying you can,
No, it's
you
different.
can replace angel with something
No,
that
no, but
doesn't
if
exist.
you don't mind, let me tell you the difference. The difference is, science does not deal with things which are metaphysical. Mathematics, for example, language, for example, formal logic, for example, the scientific method, for example, those are metaphysical precepts by which and through which...
Define metaphysical.
Metaphysical is that which is not tangible, yet we still believe in it as a matter
Concepts
of...
that we constructed our mind.
Yes, like mathematics.
In our mind.
No, it doesn't necessarily have to be constructed by our mind, but that which
How
you
do we
can
know
use.
that there's angels if we don't think of them? Like, you think of angels as a concept.
No, I don't say they're concepts. I'm saying they're metaphysical in the sense that you cannot
As in
verify.
not physical.
You cannot verify them using physical means. You cannot use the five senses to see the existence of
That's a
an
question.
Okay, but that's the argument from
You
ignorance.
say you believe in angels.
That's a fallacy. It's a logical
You
fallacy.
believe in jinns and angels. I'm asking you, why do you believe in jinns and angels? Where's your evidence?
Yeah, right. So the reason why because you're asking about me in the second person. So for me, from my first person,
Why do you believe in angels?
I believe in the existence of angels because once again, if we start from the epistemological base, which is the Quran, I believe that the Quran has enough evidence to substantiate its authority as the word of God. Therefore,
You believe in angels because the Quran says they exist.
as a logical extension, I believe all of the precepts, all of the concepts, and all the
There's
metaphysics.
a lot of things in the Quran that aren't true.
Give me an example.
The sun
They
setting in the
think
muddy
that,
spring.
for example, they think that sperm
Go ahead.
is created here.
Where does it say that?
I don't know the exact.
Okay, so it's mentioned in chapter 86 of the Quran.
I haven't read it. That's what
Okay.
I know things are
I
perfect.
know, but see.
That's not true.
Well, let me tell you.
It's
Right?
made of blood and between the ribs or something like that, isn't it?
Well, I'll tell you what it says. I'll tell you what it says. But do you know the Arabic language?
Not at all, no.
Okay,
I know the translation.
No, I know you know the translation, but now I'm someone who has memorized this part of the Quran, knows the Arabic language, and seen the exegetes and what they have to say about it. So,
This is always the
there's
response.
two ways of dealing with this, my
In a
friend.
logical problem.
No, hold on. You
we
can
got
either accept me now as someone who's going to narrate responsibly what the exegetes have said.
I will accept what you're about to say is in the Quran.
So it says, yeah. So, فَيَنْظُرُ الْإِنسَانِ مِمَّا خُلِقَ.
In English.
I'm going to say it in Arabic and
I don't know
translate
the
it.
Arabic, there's no
I'm
point.
going to translate it.
Just say it in English.
Okay, so let the human being wander from where he was created. خُلِقَ مِنْ مَاءٍ دَافِقٍ. He was created from a gushing fluid. يَخْرُجُ مِنْ بَيْنِ الصُّلْبِ وَالتَّرَائِبِ. That it comes from this word called sulb and tara'ib. The word sulb in the Arabic language has many different meanings. In fact, the exegetes of the Quran.
So they can choose what something between us. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying that the Arabic language facilitates a variety of different meanings. Let's go with the one that you just mentioned. The one that you mentioned is that between the backbone and the ribs, which I think the majority of translators go with. Now there are two main points of consideration. One is that this is not talking about sperm anyways, because the word for sperm specifically is nutfa. Yeah, the word for sperm in Arabic is
What talking about?
or many. So here, يخرج من ماء دافق. ماء دافق in Arabic literally means a gushing fluid. Some have said this is referring to semen, because actually semen is distinguished from sperm. And if you look at where the seminal glands are and the prostate gland, both of which actually produce semen, you'll find, even from that perspective, that they are lodged between what is the backbone and the ribs.
No, they're not. The prostate gland is in your anus. I'm sorry. The prostate gland is in your anus.
No, but if you look at if we had a dummy of where the backbone is and where the ribs are.
The ribs end here though.
Yeah. So it's in between here and here.
It's lower down. It's
But
about
this
here.
is all very vague. What about when the Quran says the sun sets in a muddy field, muddy spring?
Oh, it doesn't say that.
It does say that.
It says no. Well, let me tell you what it says, because you're saying it says something, but here I am to correct you because I'm someone,
Please correct
with respect, who has studied it and who might know more about this than you.
I'm sure you know more of the Quran than I do.
Maybe. I don't know what you're doing or what you've studied.
I don't want to read the Quran because
Right,
it's
so-
so falsifiable. But go ahead. Please,
So-
please tell me, what does it say about the muddy
So
spring?
what it says is that there was this character in chapter 18 of the Quran. And by the way, we don't believe in it, as you know, just to make this clear, that science is the be-all and end-all and that it's perfect. And we've had this discussion before and it's on the record. But even if we say that, there was a character called Dhul Qarnayn, mentioned in Dhul Qarnayn. Dhul Qarnayn is mentioned in the end of chapter 18 of the Quran. And he was exploring the world. He was exploring the world. In fact, according to the Quranic narrative, he went this way, he went that way, he went this way, he went different places. Then it says that he went to a place west coast, yeah, and he said wajadaha, he saw the sun setting in the murky water. He saw that. But if you know about the Quranic discourse here, almost every exegete, even the classical ones that I've written 900 years ago, are saying that Dhul Qarnayn is talking about his personal, what he saw, wajadaha. And that's why it says he saw it going under. It doesn't say that the sun in and of itself as a celestial body sets in the murky water, and that's what the
This
exegetes
person
say.
is Alexander the Great, is he not?
No, there's a difference of opinion among the exegetes. The correct opinion is that he was not Alexander the Great. Some said he's Cyprus the Great and others, but there is a difference.
So
Because
your
Alexander
explanation
the
is
Great.
it's simply reporting what he saw
Yes.
as opposed to what happened.
Because the Quran says in chapter, for example, if we look at chapter number 21, verse number 33, وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. If you look at chapter 36, verse 40, it talks about the sun, the earth, and the moon. Yeah? And it says, وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. That all of those things are in an orbit with their own rotation. And in fact, Ibn Abbas, who was the most senior Sahabi companion who narrated upon the Quran, he said that means to say that the sun has its own rotation, right? And he actually brought a spinning wheel and he demonstrated that to the Sahaba, so to the companions of the Prophet.
Does the Quran talk about seven heavens?
It talks about seven heavens.
So what are seven heavens?
Seven heavens are, I would describe them as, the Quranic discourse says that we live in the first heaven. So in other words, wherever we see, because in chapter 67 of the Quran, it says that وَلَقَدْ جَعَلْنَا سَمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا وَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحَ وَجَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِلشَّيَاطِينَ. We have certainly adorned the lower heaven with stars, and we have made it a pelting thing for the devil. In other words, wherever we see stars or celestial bodies that resemble stars and planets, that is the first heaven. From that perspective, the Quran, it demonstrates that there are seven such heavens.
What, there are
in
heavens
chapter
beyond the stars, there's another heaven.
Yeah, so
another heaven.
above and beyond the universe, there are other entities which exist.
And the evidence for this is?
The evidence
But
for
the
it,
Quran says it.
No, the evidence for it is the same evidence that atheists employ when they talk about multiverse.
No, atheists don't say the multiverse
Every
exists, they
single
say it's a
scientific
speculation.
point in the Quran was already known about before. Of
course.
It's not like this is the other thing too. Why was nothing about quantum physics or about?
Yes, why don't they talk about
The Quran
electrons
is
and protons?
fundamentally a book of guidance for people, right? It's not meant to confuse
No, but
people.
God told him these, scientific things that only God would possibly know.
Does
at
the
time.
Quran say that
It's been
shooting
known about
stars
for ages.
are missiles sent by Allah to destroy jinns trying to get into heaven?
Yeah, that's what I just recited.
Is that what it says?
وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحَ وَجَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِلشَّيَاطِينَ.
Shooting stars, which we know what they are in scientific terms, but apparently according to Quran, they're missiles that Allah sent to try and stop jinns getting sticking into heaven.
Yeah, so what we believe is that, do you know how you have fortune tellers, yeah? This is actually what we believe. You have you've probably had from experience, like horoscopes, fortune tellers. We consider that the person who goes to a fortune teller committing one of the major sins, in fact, one of the things that takes them out of Islam. By the way, it's just an interesting point to note, yeah? We believe that there are entities called the jinn, which are in fact synonymous. Some of the jinn are the devils, yeah? We believe in devils.
For which there's no evidence again.
Okay, well, you say no evidence, you mean empirical evidence. And we've already discussed the empirical point.
You could assert anything and say there's no evidence for it, but
Exactly,
it's true.
thank you.
You
Exactly.
could say anything is true by that logic.
Yeah, okay, but the thing is, what you're failing to understand, is that we believe in the metaphysical descriptions mentioned in the Quranic discourse because of the evidences that the Quran presents. You get it? So, for instance, if a quantum physicist came to you and says X, Y, Z is happening on a atomic or a subatomic level, yeah, you would accept their testimony based on the fact that you know they've got the instruments and the qualifications and the ability to potentially tap into this domain of the quantum
You have
physical
peer
world.
reviewing too at times.
Pardon?
Peer reviewing.
Yes, you do have peer reviewing. Okay, so what we're
You
saying.
can't peer review the Quran. Apparently it's true.
No,
Like you can't.
very good point.
Very good point.
Actually,
Good point.
there is a way of falsifying the Quran. The Quran gives
logic.
us
It's called rationality and logic.
because your
We have a
assumption.
book that has a few scientific basic principles that were known about for years before that. Everything there was common, like the salt and the sweet water. That was common knowledge, and they do actually mix. You have brackish water and estuary.
I haven't made the argument to you right now
No, but what I'm
that
saying
this
is, you
was
have
not.
a book that has some things that were known about that are actually true. They were already known about, though. And then a lot of other stuff that may not be true. There's no proof for it, but you saying that everything is.
One
You can show things are true
vouches for
these
the
days,
other,
which is
eh?
like this. They knew about those principles already. It was common knowledge.
You would not be able to differentiate. So if I had 50 miracles as would be, yeah, I have to be very smart to be able to pick only the 10 that are right and leave the rest that are incorrect.
No, these are basic concepts that they already knew about. That's what I'm saying.
For
It's not
instance,
something that would have had to be.
let's use embryology, right? So of all the things that in terms of scientific things, now I'm not an advocate of what you call trying to prove the Quran using science. I'm not an advocate of that. Because frankly, as
You
we've
prove
said,
any book with that. It's
no.
tradeable. That's
No.
what I'm saying.
What I'm saying to you is, from the philosophy of science, as we've discussed before, Thomas Kuhn's writings, I think, are very accurate and very descriptive in this. That science it does change and it's not perfect in terms of its epistemological truth value. However, if we look at, you were saying that, is there any, because what you seem to be indicating here, is there anything in the Quranic discourse which is concurrent with the scientific reality as is known today, which wasn't known at that time or before that time? And I say, yeah, I agree that I believe that there are parts of the Quran which fit that description. And what I would say is, the parts of the Quran which fit that description relate to the embryological development of the woman, or of the womb. I believe that it fits that description.
That's a dodgy one.
For
you
instance,
picked there.
I read the works of Galen, I read the works of Hippocrates, and I've read the works of Aristotle on this, yeah? All of which, in the case of Aristotle, all wrong, thank you. But Aristotle, for instance, he believed that the baby was formed as a result of menstruation and sperm coming together. And he also believed that the baby...
Yeah, fluids coming together.
No, menstruation, and he specified menstruation and sperm coming together. And he also said that he believed that the baby would be the same form and then just grow bigger and bigger. So in other words, he didn't believe in incremental development of the baby. And he didn't believe that it had any different form. He believed that the way it comes out is basically the way it looks. Now, if you look at, and this is why we would advocate what we would call like a multi-layered approach. The Quranic descriptions, I'll tell you what I mean by this. The Quranic descriptions of the embryological development of babies in the womb of mothers is not only reconcilable. I'll tell you. It's not only reconcilable. This is the point first, and I'll give you the evidence and then the explanation, like they do in school. It's not only reconcilable with what they believed at the time, but it's also concurrent of what we know today. And I don't believe that can be said of anything, whether it be religious or extra-religious, of the time of the Prophet, before the time of the Prophet, or even after the time of the Prophet by 500, 600, 700 years. So let me tell you, that's my point. The evidence of the passages of the Quran, you'll find in two distinct places of the Quran where it specifies this. So for example, chapter 22, Surah Al-Hajj of the Quran, and chapter 23, Surah Al-Mu'minun of the Quran, it describes that the baby in the womb of the mother, first and foremost, he talked about chapter 86 of the Quran, Surah Al-Tariq, that the Quran seems to differentiate between a fluid which gushes from a higher part of the body from the sperm, because it uses different terminologies and phraseologies for that. So, ma'in dafiq is gushing fluid, and it then says many or nutfa to distinguish that man dafiq from the sperm itself. The sperm, it says in chapter 76, verse 2, it says that that the human being is created from an intermingling of the two different kinds of the two fluids. Now, it's really interesting terminology here because it suggests that both the man and the woman have something to do with the fertilization process. It does say that. It does suggest that. But not in the way...
Very similar wording from before.
But it's not suggested in the same way that Aristotle, for instance, explicitly mentioned, which is that it's the woman's menstruation and the man's sperm. So there is a differentiation there. Then you'll find in chapter 96 of the Quran, verse 1 and 2, when it talks about the human being made of alaq. Alaq comes from the Arabic word meaning something which literally clings, or a clot of blood, or whatever it may be. And you'll find that, generally speaking, that the baby does act like a bloodsucker, frankly. It does act like a bloodsucker. It has an umbilical cord. It takes the nutrients from the uterine wall.
You're saying very vague things and saying, oh, this could mean that, this could mean that, therefore it does.
Let me continue.
You're trying to interpret language in a way that suits
But you haven't let me put the full case forward.
What about the bones coming first?
No, well, let me come to that, right?
Oh, in 9 months' time.
So in chapter number 22 and chapter
9 months
23,
to wait for this.
in chapter 22 and chapter 23, it defines the stages of embryological development. In both of those places, it talks about alaqa and mudgha. Mudgha is literally something which seems to have been bitten, something which seems to have been chewed, yeah?
These are vague terms. You're making it mean what you want it to
Now, what I'm
mean.
saying to you is this. Forget about me saying to you that this is an argument to prove that the Quran is true. I'm not making that point. I'm saying, look at this. These claims are interesting in so much as they don't contradict the 21st century reality in any explicit way. That's the interesting part for me. Like, for example, the guy that was talking about...
These things were already known about, though.
No, give me an example of what was known about. Galen, who died in 210 AD, who was probably the foremost person who wrote about these things, he didn't mention the term alaqa. He didn't mention days in particular. You know, in the riwayah of Ibn Mas'ud, there's 2 hadiths actually that reference what happens in the mother's womb. And it says that in 40 days, you can distinguish between whether this thing is a male or a female. And it says that actually that point, the ruh, or the soul, is blown into it. So the point is this, right? It becomes viable. This is called ensoulment. What I'm saying to you is, I'm not saying to you look at the Quranic scientific, I'm not an advocate of what they refer to as the scientific miracles of the Quran, but what I am an advocate of, or what I am telling you is, what's really interesting about the Quranic narrative is that when it talks about materialistic phenomena, or things which relate to the natural world, as per the scientific discourse, it does so in a way which is not only reconcilable with that which the primary audience of the time would have understood, but also understandable from our perspective, and not necessarily contradictory in a way which is completely irreconcilable.
It's because it's said in such a simple, vague way. You could apply it to today as well.
Yes, correct.
You know, a few hundred years ago they said that, okay, let's say it was just a joke, yeah, that the moon is made of cheese, yeah? Is that vague, or is there any way of actually proving that?
You can say vague things that are true and aren't true.
So they said it via observation, am I correct? My point is this. You state now, and it's going to go back to Muhammad in a minute, just only 1 minute. What I was stating earlier on was, you stated that, and it's an understandable statement, that, those things were well known back then. What I'm trying to say is, let's say you're back there 1,400 years ago, and you have stated that all animals are made of water, let's just say, yeah? How would you know if you were telling the truth or not? Would you know that? Would you have known that?
What are you asking? Listen, they weren't well known scientifically. They were known as concepts.
What he's saying is that we say that now because you have the power of hindsight. Now you can retrospectively look. Now what we're saying is that what's interesting about the Quranic narrative, we're not saying that it has to be in perfect harmony with the scientific narrative.
Perfect though.
Right.
Apparently.
No, hold on. What we're saying is science changes. So for instance, we had the steady state theory, and now we have the expanding model of the universe, right? we had Newtonian physics. Now we have Einsteinian physics. So science is not a static thing. We don't believe that science.
No, but the
However,
Quran says it's perfect, doesn't it?
are you listening to what I'm saying? Because I'm saying that science is not.
Science changes, yeah.
Yes, if science changes, then the Quran, if it were to be perfectly in line with science, then it itself would not be perfect. Because if science is changing, then the Quran would have to change with it.
Because it also says, you know, you had what's that thing about Pegasus flying up to heaven?
Pegasus.
I don't know exactly.
We don't
Or
have
like
any
a
Pegasus.
flying horse or something.
What about the flying? There's no flying horse.
Wasn't there? You said something about
Where's
that.
the flying horse? We talk about Burak.
Burak, yeah.
Burak.
What was it? Yeah.
Okay, Burak. Okay, what's the problem with Burak? Tell me what the problem.
Well,
Do you know what? Let me tell you something. Atheists believe in Burak. You know, I've seen this in the recent debate. One of, I'm not going to mention his name. I don't want to give him any.
Oh, one
publicity.
guy thinks it, so everyone else does.
No, hold on,
That's
hold
what
on.
you're saying.
Let me tell you something right now. Atheists. I can tell you something right now, yeah? This is something that people say all the time. Oh, look, Muslims believe that, you know, flying horse and, you know, okay, well, hold on. I can tell you now, unequivocally, that it's not just, Muslims are not unique in this belief. You know who believes this as well?
I don't know.
And then let me tell you, atheists believe in the flying horse.
No, no. Which one? Which one?
No, hold on,
Which
hold on.
one?
So some people
Atheists
think
believe
it's
in,
true.
and
so
then let me
therefore
tell you
it's
why
true.
they believe in that. Wait. See, no, hold on.
This is a bit
No, hold on.
exciting,
I'll tell you
this,
why.
Will.
I'll tell you why.
Startling
Do you
revelation
accept
here.
that some atheists believe in the multiverse theory?
Yeah.
It's actually a very popular theory in atheist circles. Yes?
Is it?
Yes, I can tell you that it is
You tell us then.
from my analysis of the sociological.
You've asked 6 billion people, have you?
Well, I don't think there are 6 billion atheists.
Or just in general, people on the
Well,
planet?
anyways, from what I've seen, multiverse, especially in academic circles, is becoming more and more popular, especially among atheists. Okay, an atheist who believes in multiverse. Most of the atheists, academics, who believe in the multiverse theory, believe in an infinite amount of universes, correct?
I mean, it's certainly
I've heard
possible.
it.
That's what I'm saying.
You're saying it's possible. That's it. Thank you. You know
said
why?
it could go on forever.
Do you know what
It
that
depends.
means? Do you know what that entails? What that entails when you say that there are an infinite amount of universes is that all potential possibilities have been actualized.
No.
All will be actualized.
No, I'm sure what they would say. I don't.
No, hold on. Listen to what I'm saying very carefully, right?
It's a
If you-
possibility.
listen carefully. If you believe,
they believe in it.
no, hold on.
No,
If you believe
possible.
in an infinite amount of universes, then what you actually believe is that all potential possibilities either have, are, or will be actualized. That's what you believe in.
I don't personally.
No.
That's
You said it's
fair
possible,
enough.
yes?
That's all right, yeah.
Yes. So okay, hold on. Because this might sound.
Are you saying there could be a God in someone? Is that what you're saying?
No, hold on. Let me say this one more time because I know it's a bit much to swallow.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Good,
My point is this: atheists who believe in a multiverse of an infinite amount of universes believe that there was a man called Muhammad who flew with Burak. Do you know why? Do you know why? Because they believe in an infinite amount of possibilities that have,
really clever what you're
will,
doing there.
or will be. No, hold on. Or will be actualized. Now, do you know what that means?
But that's assuming there's a multiverse and assuming that it works in that way.
Okay, so my question to you is there a possibility on this model that there was a man called Muhammad that flew to the heavens, yes or no? With this thing called Burak? Yes or no? Yes or
You're
no?
doing that thing where you try and trap them in the corner. I'm not going to say
no,
yes
no,
or no.
It's a genuine question. It's a possibility, isn't it? You couldn't negate it as a possibility.
Okay, let's say yes.
Yes.
That's what you
so
want me to say.
according to you, it's possible on this model that there was a man called Muhammad who claimed to be a prophet who flew to the heavens with this thing called Burak.
How will we find out?
So me and you are on the same page. I don't think there's anything different between
How
us.
will we find out? How will we find out, though?
You know what we're going to find out?
We're going to find out.
We're going to find out, brother.
All right, then.
We'll see.
We'll see.
The thing is, atheists believe.
At
And
the
this
end,
is the new
after
atheist
all this
thinking.
is done, this is why people come back. At the end of the day, you can't prove
No.
there's a
No.
God.
Atheists believe, and this is the thing, it's the problem. Atheists believe that which is, and this is what some
Only
that's
those
come out
who
of this
believe
debate.
in multiverses.
Atheists come to believe that actually, if something is not verifiable through empiricism, then it must be false, which is the argument from ignorance. What I'm saying is a fallacy. What I'm saying is that we've already established metaphysical precepts like formal logic, like mathematics, like language, like the scientific method itself, like axioms and theorems in mathematics. All of those things have been designated, or abstract things, and therefore for Plato, were designated in the land of forms, or there's a mode, there's a whole world of forms. It's not something you can verify, but you'd never deny the existence of mathematics. The thing is, just because something is metaphysical, from a philosophical perspective, something you cannot see or have not witnessed, it doesn't mean it has not happened. Let me tell you something, yeah?
How can we check it?
Why are you so fascinated with the fact that there's a man called Muhammad that took on this, or who wrote...
I said one passing phrase. You're acting like I've been going on about it.
No, but it's not just you, it's in the narrative, trust me.
You believe in the narrative verses anyway.
Why are you so fascinated by the fact that could be a man who rode this special vehicle called the Al-Buraq, who actually moved from one part of the world to another part? We've got those things now. They're called planes, trains, automobiles. We have rockets. Let me tell you something. Yes. Hold on. It's not a horse. It's not a horse. It's called Al-Buraq. It's a
different creature.
It's something which God created, yeah. And God, we believe, is the all-powerful, which literally is a transportation vehicle. Yeah, which allows for that kind of trespassing or movement from different places.
Painted as a
Now
horse?
listen to me carefully. If I were living 100, forget about 1,000 years ago, 150 years ago, do you know when planes were invented? Tell me when planes were invented.
Don't know the exact year.
I'll tell you about 1895, yeah? The Wright brothers.
1903.
1903, is it the Wright brothers, yeah? Some say that there were planes that came before, and the Wright brothers, they're credited with the invention of planes. We'll talk about 100 years ago. 200 years ago, same country. You say to someone who's used to seeing a horse and carriage, you say to them, listen, there's going to come a time. You say, wait a minute, what are you saying? I'll tell you again. There's going to come a time where people en masse are going to be flying in the air and going to be drinking, you know, and going to the toilet in the air.
That's nothing to do
No,
with
hold
what
on.
you're saying.
If you say to those people that that's going to happen, can they fathom that? Have they experienced that? Have they seen that? Have they heard that? Have they smelt that? Have they felt that? No, they haven't. No, they haven't. But the fact that they have not experienced those things doesn't negate that is a reality.
But you
which
could argue
happen,
anything is true,
and
or
has
anything
happened,
could happen then.
and is happening.
That's such an ignorant way of saying it, because you
Why?
could say anything could happen then.
Sorry, a moment.
Okay, so that's what you said.
Yeah, you said the Buraq, that a flying horse. You said just
I'm
to say.
not- I'm not-
You said it
I
as if
just
it's
made
funny.
one comment. I'm not.
Oh no! I just mean that
Hold
the
on a
fact is,
minute.
you said it as a negating term, as if that proves Islam wrong.
You see.
Well, no, as one of many terms that can't be.
it's
But
not-
but he just showed
This is
that it's
a
not.
collapse because
Yeah.
actually
Wait,
here,
hold on
this is
a minute.
unscientific.
I'm giving up.
The
Because-
platypus.
it's
People were laughing at the
unscientific.
platypus a while ago.
Listen to me.
I'm giving up my belief
Listen
in
to me carefully.
multiverses anyway.
This
now.
argument that's put across now by I would say a self-congratulating, narcissistic, post-colonial.
That's what you do with the Quran. You say, oh, the
No, hold
Quran
on.
must be true because it's the
I'm
Quran.
not saying that. I'm saying a self-congratulating, narcissistic, post-colonial, atheistic, materialistic,
That's what you're saying, I am.
naturalistic.
No.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you.
You're saying atheist.
He's
I'm
saying the
saying
narrative.
the archetypal
Yeah,
new atheist, like Richard Dawkins, and his likes and his people of his ilk, they come with this argument as if it's some kind of Trump argument. As if it's some kind of...
No, it's a humorous thing to think of, though.
No, it's humorous because
Is
you
the
haven't
platypus
experienced...
a funny thing to think of?
Just because something is not...
It's real.
But that's real. That's the thing.
Just because something is not... Just because something, you cannot envisage it. You have not experienced it. It doesn't mean it's not true. You see how that works? That's called the
Doesn't
argument
mean
of
it's
ignorance.
true either, though.
I'm not...
Like you can't.
I've
You
listened
could
to
say anything could be true by
It's
that
not the
logic.
angle to
Yes,
deny it from. Is what he's saying.
Right. What we're saying is, if you want to know, if you want to live, if you want to be in the mind of a religious person, understand how religious people, rationalize their belief. It's not philosophically ingenuous to try and throw these straw man arguments, red herrings, or
You
otherwise.
do the straw man with atheists all the time. Like, as a principle, religious people throw the straw man out all the time. They say these people think that, therefore this isn't true. But this, they do that thing all the time, though.
I'm sure they do.
It's human nature to do that sometimes.
Fair enough.
for the
Okay,
sake
but
of
do you see where we're
argument.
coming from?
Sort of, not really, but
All right.
I'll say yes.
I'm saying to you this. Look, Simba, listen to me carefully.
Did he break you?
We're saying God is one. He created the universe. Yeah? He created human beings in the universe. He created us with a purpose. That purpose is to recognize his existence.
Why were humans created? Like, so humans were created full stop, or do you, like? Because are you saying that humans were created as humans, sort of thing? straight away. But why not? Why can't? I mean, this is again. I'm getting into another branch here. But what about? I'm going to say the word that's going to probably trigger a lot of people around here. What about evolution? That's what I'm saying though.
I'm going to tell you something.
Because you get Muslims deny that as like.
Look, yeah, as I said to you before, this is such an exhausting argument, and we've had those arguments, we've had those discussions, right?
And you can't
about evolution.
prove your views on.
We're saying that
we can.
Darwinian evolution is a valid model, yeah, to
It fits in the evolution.
reconciling different things. But if I say to you, look, I'm going to say to you that there are certain precepts of Darwinian evolution which cannot be substantiated.
Tell me some proof.
For
that
example,
evolution
homology.
isn't real.
Homology is the idea that something, everything in existence, in terms of biology.
Can I just ask, does the Quran say that evolution isn't true, or does it imply that evolution can't exist?
No.
Or do you get...
The Quran specifically says that human being is distinguished from all of the other animals.
Okay, so therefore evolution can't be true.
So human evolution in particular, we don't care about speciation. We don't care about adaptation. We don't care about all of those things. We don't actually have a beef with those things. We're just saying that human being was made special, and that he was created directly from God, and that there was no random process that created the human being. So that was a direct guided process.
Give me some evidence for that. Like that, humans... That's
okay, fine. Some
against evolution. Give me some...
No, what I'm going to say to you is that evolution, in and of itself, is a valid model, right? Darwinian evolution is a valid model. However, there are some of the premises of evolution, the logical precepts of it, which cannot be substantiated. For example, homology, right? If I said to you, homology is the idea that everything that exists in terms of the biological world around us descends to one common ancestor, or one single cell, that potentially everything, the web of life, or whatever you want to call it, the tree of life, has all sprouted from, has come from this one single cell. If that is the case, the assumption is as follows. The assumption is that everything has come to existence, all the differences within creatures can be explained because of, all the similarities that exist within creatures can be explained because of common difference. But that's a circular argument, and that's actually one
There are many different branches.
No, but you listen to me. So many have talked about the problem of substantiating homology as a logical precept, as a foundational epistemological underpinning precept, almost axiomatic, or a pillar that actually holds up this idea of evolution. We're saying that it's a secular argument to say that how can you prove that everything which is similar is a result of common descent? And then you say the reason why is because everything which is similar is because it's from common descent. No, but that's, you're saying no. Well, it's a problem on the highest levels of academia.
There's biological, there's archaeological, there's so many different...
Look, the point I'm making to you is, when you look at a Darwinian evolution model, it says that everything in existence exists because all the similarities that we can see in creation or in the biological world is a result of common descent. Is that understood? So the fact that we all came from one singular cell, for instance, that all of the similarities, because the opposite of homology is homoplasy. Homoplasy is the differences between different biological creatures. Homology says it's similarities between different biological organisms can be explained through the fact that they all commonly descend from one species. I'm asking, how can you prove that everything, all the similarities are explained through common descent? Someone will say, to answer that question, because they all come from common descent. But in logic, that's called a circular argument.
No, you can prove it. Well, you're asking how to prove evolution, is that what you're saying?
Okay, I think this might be a little bit... I told you this was going to be a difficult thing to talk about, right? I'm saying homology. Do you understand what homology is?
Yeah, basically.
What's homology?
I understand.
I've explained it to you, so I want to know if you know what I'm talking about.
I understand. I mean, I understand the basics. I couldn't give you a definition of it.
What is homology and what is homoplasy?
I couldn't give you a definition of it. I know the basics.
Okay. Homology. Let me say it one more time.
Again, I'm not qualified to talk about it.
So let's talk about it.
We can talk about it.
Homology is that everything in existence in terms of biological organisms, the similarities in those things can be explained because of common descent. Magic mushroom. Are somewhat related. You understand? So, homology would be
There's a lot of
no, I'm saying homology is an underpin. In order to do science, there is something called the philosophy of science. In order to do biology, there is something called the philosophy of biology. Yeah? So, the philosophy of science tells us how to do science. Hypothesis, interpretation, peer review, classification, etc. Okay. The philosophy of biology are the logical precepts which underpin the discipline of biology. So, one of the logical precepts which underpin the Darwinian model of evolution is this idea of homology. So, what is homology? Homology is the idea that everything in the biological framework, all similarities can be defined through the fact that we're commonly descended from one singular cell. My question is, how can we prove this?
Where are you, Judge?
He's the Lord, the healer of the soul. Holy Jesus, they give you life.
Something which can be proven.
Do you know genetic sequencing? It's
not.
That's something you
No, but you're not following what I'm saying. Homology is a precept you use to identify the patterns within evolution. You use it to understand. So if I were to ask you what is homology, it's the similarities in the... So I'm going to ask, why does homoplasy exist? Homoplasy, why does that exist? How come the differences within organisms within the web of life?
process of evolution.
Why does homoplasy exist?
Well, why do differences exist? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Why does homoplasy, especially when we're talking about something like, for example, if we're talking about the same organisms, yeah, the saber-toothed tiger, the North American saber-toothed tiger versus the South American saber-toothed tiger. How come they're not? How come there's differences and they're not even in the same family? How come?
Because they're different. I mean, they're different. They're the same species.
But they're not in the same family though.
No, they're still felines though.
No, they're not commonly descended from each other. They're not common. They're not cousins. They look very similar. You've got very similar looking animals that are not commonly descended from one another. How can you explain that? Why is that?
Because we're all made of the same stuff, essentially.
But this is not a good enough answer. So look, to understand,
you're asking me to give us. You're asking me to say one or two sentences to explain an entire
Simba,
spectrum.
you have to understand something, right? I believe strongly, from having this conversation with you, that you've been socialized into atheism. And because the thing is, you haven't applied criticality to your believing of Darwinian evolution even. You don't even know the foundational precepts which underpin...
Change over time.
I mean, no, but you have to understand something, right? There are foundational precepts which underpin the biology, the philosophy of biology. So here, I've explained to you that there's something called homology, there's something called homoplasy, and that those two things are different, in fact, antithetical to each other. And I want to understand, how can we prove homology without using homology-type definitions to prove it? Because that's the only way you can prove homology. How can you account for the existence of homoplasy? So if we can't answer those questions, then I will say to you, then you have faith, my friend. Because you believe in evolution without even understanding the precepts which underpin them. You believe in evolution.
You don't believe in the fossils and...
Listen. I'm not saying I don't believe in the fossils. There are different.
That they show
Look, the fossils are there, but there are different models by which and through which scientists use to explain the fossils. So you have Neo-Lamarckian evolution. You have, Darwinian evolution. You have different models, man, and all of these models are explaining the same data, but are compartmentalizing them in different ways. I'm saying that the evidence is there, but the way of explaining the evidence is different. Just like, for instance, if I had this cup and I dropped the cup, Einstein would have looked at that and said, okay, well, I have this way of explaining it. But Newton had X way of explaining it. Yeah? It's like when you look at celestial bodies in space, Newton had an explanation of the relationship between different points in space. And Leibniz had a different explanation. But they're looking at the same data. By the same token, we can say that evolutionists of all time and to this day are still discussing in academic spheres how to interpret data. And I'm saying that yes, although evolution is to some extent a valid model, validity does not mean absolute truth. And you see, there is a distinction between the two.
You can say that about anything. You can say anything that we know is true. Oh, we can't say it's absolutely true, so therefore it might be wrong.
That's what you were saying about religion.
What?
That's what you were saying about religion.
Yeah, but you're saying the same thing. I have evidence though. Like,
what do you have evidence? You don't even know how to explain
evolution. Evidence of
what
evolution.
is your, okay, give me explanation for homology. How do we know homology exists? Simple question. You were talking to me about Burak and the flying this and that. So that's something I believe, yeah? I believe it because I have an epistemological base which happens to be the Quran. And I believe that the Quran has offered evidences to allow me to believe in it. Now, that's my way of rationalizing it. You see, I'm asking you to rationalize your belief in homology. You believe in homology, you believe in Darwinian evolution. My contention is you believe in it because you've been socialized into believing it in the 21st century narrative of new atheism.
Have you not been socialized into believing religion from your parents or from the culture?
Yes, I probably have.
It's the same thing.
No, but the thing is, the difference is this. I have been able to apply criticality and also explain to you the reasons for believing something. Because otherwise, it would be the genetic fallacy. Who cares where something comes from? It can come from the Middle Ages, it can come from this time or that time, it can be true or false. I'm saying to you, fine, you've been socialized in this way, but at least have some kind of reasoning behind why you believe in what you believe in. Otherwise, it will show that you haven't been able to apply an appropriate amount of criticality to this particular subject matter. So you believe in something literally without evidence. In fact, you could say you believe in it because a white man with a white where's the research you've done? I'm asking you. A white man with
I haven't got a university degree, I do.
No, fine. But a white man with a white laboratory, you know what I'm saying, attire has told you this is the case, and you believe in that guy, he's become your god. Now I'm asking you, if you believe in Darwinian evolution, no problem. It's a valid model. Explain to me what is homology, and how can you prove homology to be true in light of the fact that you, without having to resort to using it to prove its own existence or its own truth.
So you're asking me to show that homology is true without
using homology.
Without studying things about fossils or like genetic sequencing.
It's not, homology is an assumption. It's not, we see, homology is an assumption that all of the similarities that we see in biology as a result of common descent. How can you prove that to be the case without using a circular argument? That's what I'm saying.
So you're asking me to explain evolution without talking about evolution. That's basically what you're saying.
If you want to prove something, you can't use the thing to prove the thing. Otherwise it becomes circular. And that's a logical fallacy.
Well, I mean, again, there's loads of... What angle do you want me to take? Biological or geological?
Well, I'm telling you, there's no way of doing it.
There's no way of saying...
Yeah, and by the way, on the highest levels, philosophers of biology have admitted that this is one of the problems. Do you see what I'm saying? So everything has problems, everything has gaps, everything has faith, including... Sorry, I apologize. Everything has faith, including evolution.
There's much more evidence for evolution than God.
Well, you can't even explain it. What is the evidence?
Again,
of homology.
have you not looked up the evidence? Can I talk about things like fossils and things like, genetic sequences and DNA? Or would you say that I can't?
Well, once again, you're talking about the branches of the tree, and I'm asking you to prove the existence of the roots of the tree. Because homology is the roots, the philosophical underpinning of evolution itself. Now, if you can't explain the root, then there's no use talking to me about the branch. Like when I started with you as a Muslim, I didn't talk to you about the Quran or the prophets, because I know the root of it all is monotheism. If you don't believe in one God, what's the point of talking to you about precepts and concepts or injunctions or prescriptions? It's important to get to the philosophical, epistemological base, and in this case, it's homology there are many assumptions. One of them is homology. I'm asking you, how can you explain? How can you prove the existence of homology without using evidences which go in line with homology in order to prove it? Because it would be a secular argument. Can you do it? So why do you believe in it?
What, evolution?
Homology.
To change. Well,
the similarity of organisms based on common descent. Why do you believe in that? Because you've been told.
It's the same thing that makes them up. It's DNA, carbon-based DNA. What do you mean?
Why do you believe in homology?
So why do I believe that everything around us that's living come from the same thing?
Yeah.
Because we're made of the same things.
No. Well, how can you prove homology is a true assumption?
With evidence. I'm not getting what you're saying. You're saying the same things over and over again.
Okay, well, but that's because I haven't received an answer. And let me tell you, to be fair, there is no answer.
Okay.
There is no answer. You could say it's axiomatic. Let me ask you a question. A plus B equals B plus A. Oh, so A, B equals B, A. A plus B equals B plus A. Is that correct? Mathematically?
Yeah.
How can you prove that?
Like, you can put numbers there. Like, what are you on about?
Because you're talking about proving things, yeah? You believe that A plus B equals B plus A.
So therefore you can't prove anything, so you can't say that.
No, what I'm saying is,
the truth.
I'm just, once again, we're using our minds here, yeah? A plus B equals B plus A is axiomatic. It's something you believe in, I believe in, without any evidence. Do you know that?
Then therefore everything that we say is the truth.
No. That's a generalizable reality.
That's what you're doing.
No. I'm just saying A plus B equals B plus A is axiomatic. An axiom is something which literally you believe in without evidence. There is no evidence of the fact that A plus B equals B plus A. You can't use any mathematical proof.
We can use linguistic evidence and say
there is no
the term plus
it's a
in
mathematical.
mathematics is addition.
No, you can't do anything. I can tell you that for a fact.
I'm not getting what you're saying.
I'm saying, you keep saying that, okay, well, you're asking me, why do you believe in
I
X?
keep feeling like you're trying to use kind of a sort of like linguistic ninja skills to try and trap me in a corner.
This is not what I say. This is Kurt Gödel.
Prove your point.
Gödel, he had something called the, what's it called now? He had a theory, which I forget the name of it, incompleteness theory. It's called incompleteness theory. And he was talking about the different precepts, and he said that there are some axioms, okay, of mathematics, which are non-provable. This is a Western European, mathematician, and he said A plus B equals B plus A is not something which you can prove. It's axiomatic. You believe in it by necessity without evidence. And I'm saying to you that there are lots of things you believe in by necessity without evidence, and you can't prove them, and you have faith in them. So the thing is, once again, part of the narrative is that anything which you have faith in must be false. Which is a false argument in and of itself. There's lots of things you have faith in, which you don't believe in, you don't have any evidence for it. Even homology is one of those things. Some mathematical axioms is another one of those things. Your own existence is a third thing. And the list goes on. You get it? So what we do, I'm going to give you now a way of dealing with it. Going back to the beginning of this conversation, what we do is we use inference to the best explanation. We see that, for example, the principle of contingency and causation, are generalizable to a high degree. We would say that in describing the existence of the universe, we say that it is contingent, it is caused. Therefore, what caused it? What is it contingent upon? We realize that actually it's contingent upon an entity which is one, which is all powerful, knowledgeable, etc. And then we say, therefore, it makes sense to believe in this entity. Why is it created? That's what we say, to recognize its existence and then to have a relationship. That's Islam.
I'll be honest, I'm starting to lose. I've been talking for hours. I'm walking through. You started talking to me from the start. I have no preparation here. You've probably been preparing for years for this sort of stuff. You're losing me.
How did it go?
It's been 3 hours.
Yeah, how long have you been? Okay. My name's Ali.
Okay.
Yeah. How did it go? What was you guys discussing?
Well, we're talking about all kinds of things.
Is it?
Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna go and pray.
I want to talk.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
All right, guys, take
It's all gonna go into the same. You know what I love doing, yeah? Getting all these videos from different angles. Come on.
You don't bring us in.
I just get it. Yeah, bro. I just get his one and his one. Merge it.
Come take over everything from your melody.
Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to
That's what you know.
So let me ask you, Lenin.
No.
In the Hafs version, it says,
Let me finish.
it is not for any human being to whom Allah has given the book and al-hukmah and prophethood
Talk about the Quran,
to say
the Bible's here.
to the
You run
people,
away.
be my worshippers rather than Allah's. On the contrary, you, Rabbayun, because you are teaching and you are studying it.
That's not just talking.